No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
So I want to talk about something that is really timely. I was watching a conversation happen on this kind of open forum discussion area of one of my clients where people in the kind of line level or middle management area were trying to figure out how to do something in relation to COVID-19, something to put into place or how to fix a problem. And they were almost crippled by their inability to have somebody come and tell them what to do. And as a person who doesn't work directly for the organization, just kind of watching this happen, I could think of several things they could do. None of them are in policy or part of the playbook or part of the handbook, but we're in unprecedented times where there isn't necessarily a playbook or a handbook for everything that's going on. And so what I'm wondering is, this is probably widespread. There are probably a lot of people who work in organizations, they're in leadership roles, and they almost feel crippled by this idea that they're almost waiting for the answer to come to them so they can pass it along to their team, as opposed to just making some decisive leadership decisions. Have you ever been in a situation like this where you felt like you were having to kind of remind yourself this is what leadership is? Or do you ever been crippled by this before?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in many times in my career, in organizations where there's been things like, reorganizations and conversations with team members and, things that happen, like I'll never forget, like when the big gaming consoles were really big and like the new Xbox came out and the PlayStation came out. And
Sure.
then there were like not enough of them were shipped, to the stores from so we were having all these situations where there was no process, there was no playbook, there was only the intent of what we were trying to do. And for some people and some leaders, the reaction was usually one of two things. It was either like, it's got to be like, this is the plan. It has to be perfect. It's got to be this exact thing. It's got to be by the book and this exact process. And if it's not that, and if it doesn't like have a line for that type of a thing or adjustment or change, then we shouldn't do it. And then you had people that were like, well, you know what? Like, it doesn't say we can, it doesn't say we can't. So like, let's just not do anything. Let's let somebody else make a decision. And that was kind of what would happen in those situations. And I think even to your point right now, there is this feeling and idea of, well, we don't really have a plan for this, so somebody should have a plan, or if somebody does have a plan, we should wait for them to tell us what the plan is. Or you have people that are like, well, if there's no plan, then like let's just wait and see, and let's not do anything. And then I think that you've got the sweet spot of leadership, which is the balance of calculated risk and courage and elements of instinct based on experience, where somebody goes, well, if the intent is this, if the intent is to have this experience for a customer or for an employee or for the company, then I'm going to make a decision that I believe best aligns with that intent. And then I guess we'll just see what happens, right? And I think in this type of space, people that see the work in that way, I think are probably seeing either more success or they're having a better interaction or a better reaction from their people and their teams.
Sure. I think it comes down to, so every organization has like a standard operating platform or procedure or manual of what to do in certain situations. And those things are developed and created by people who have been through those situations. So if you have spent 20 years doing something and then you start an organization and you're asked to write the standard operating platform, you have 20 years of experience. Say, okay, I know that in this situation, this is what I've done before. This works. Let's put that into the standard operating platform. And that works largely most of the time. Until it doesn't. There's always a plan until there's no plan. And when there's no plan, it's usually because what you're dealing with has never happened before or is so rare that no one's really taken the time to sit down and create a plan for it. Because it would be stupid to waste thousands and thousands of hours coming up with plans for everything that no matter how rare or impossible it could be to happen. You need to be able to set your people up in such a way where they feel comfortable doing things that allows you to look at where it's done right and where it's not done right. And that allows you to develop the plan going forward based on what's right and what's not right. And I think in some organizations, the culture is so strong from a procedural or a process standpoint, where it's a robust system in place for developing processes, and they're good processes. 99% of the time, they run exactly like they're supposed to do. That can almost be crippling in terms of the leaders are not put often into situations where they have to exercise that muscle, where they have to come up with what the solution is because their company provides it for them. But that can lead them to think there is no solution, or to just sit there and wait. Almost like, if I was standing on a boat and it was sinking, I wouldn't wait for the captain to tell me to put my life vest on. I would just do that, and that has nothing to do with thinking that, nothing's going to happen to me. Someone's going to come in and tell me what to do here. It's no, I'm taking responsibility for myself. The same thing can be said for really anything when it comes to coming up with new procedures for business.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, and I love the analogy of kind of the sinking ship, because again, like if you operate in the mentality of like, well, there are people and like their job is to keep the boat afloat, like I'm going to trust they're going to do their job.
Sure.
I'm still probably going to put a life vest on, right? I can trust that people are doing everything they possibly can, but I'm also going to live in a reality where maybe it's not going as well as I think it should go. Or to your point, like, everybody has a plan until there's no plan. It immediately brought me back to the story that I tell in my book around support and around the smoothie company, where I walked in to get my smoothie that day, and the registers were down. Something had happened to the POS system, and they were like, sorry, we can't make smoothies. Like we're shut down. And as I'm in there talking and then listening to the dialogue, what I'm hearing as an assistant manager making a call and saying like, well, hold on, like, I'm like, why can't you make the smoothies? Well, because in the system, it tells us what the ingredients are and how to make the smoothie. Yeah. And I'm like, so
is this your first day?
Right. Like you don't have any of these printed out somewhere. You don't have them on laminates. Like, how do you train people? Like,
right.
I have all these questions now. And of course they're in like this flux of trying to figure out like, how do we get around this type of thing? And so one of them made this courageous call to say, well, hold on. I know like 4 or 5 different smoothies by heart. Like these are the ones that people get the most. I know how to make them. And we have our little swipe things that we use when we go off site to sell people smoothies. So like we're using the phone that we have in here with the credit card swiper, and I'm only being able to offer the 4 or 5 smoothies I know how to make. So like somebody had this courageous idea and there's no playbook, there's no SOP for that. There's no, if it goes down, find the one person who's memorized the 5 smoothie recipes and remember to use the phone. But that is where a leader, either by title or not, steps in and says, I'm going to do something, because the intent here is that we still got to sell smoothies, and I got employees here and I got customers here. Let me figure this type of thing out. So I think again, like this is that time where you don't want to get locked into either it has to be perfect and or I have to wait to be told what to do, or I'm going to do nothing because I don't want to do anything wrong. Like if you're in one of those two spaces right now, it's probably not only freezing up your team and the ability for them to be effective at all, it's probably damaging your brand as a leader if it's not already been damaged, in previous episodes of not taking action when you should.
For sure. And I want to separate two things here, because I think there's two elements to that story that are important to make sure we don't flood them together. One, I don't fault them for not having things written down if they truly have never needed it before. If it's run like a well-oiled machine, when a new person comes in, they go to get trained and it comes up on the computer system and they watch the computer screen and it works fine. If no one's ever needed it other than how it's worked before, they always say necessity is the mother of innovation. You don't need to invent a solution for something if there isn't a problem to begin with. So the very first time that the system goes down and they can't see the smoothies anymore, then I understand why you wouldn't have them all written down to be able to reference. And I understand how someone would say, well, I've been here a year. I know by heart these 5 or whatever they are. So if you want to go that route, or just kind of tell me what you like in your smoothie and I'll kind of put it together. It's a blender. How hard is it? Put the stuff in and hit go. But then the next day is day 1 of making sure that everything's written down and laminated and printed out. So that's how experience creates process as you go forward. So there are 2 different things. I don't really fault the person for not having it in place, the plan in place already, but I do fault them for not instinctively saying, all right, there is no plan, there can't be a plan because we've never encountered this before. How do we solve the goal that we've been entrusted to solve from an organization? And I think the big part of this is where organizational and personal values come into play. So when you talk about being able to take a stand and say, okay, there is no process, there is no procedure, what am I going to do to not just sit back and hope things work out? Because when leaders do that, you're right, they're de-risking it. They're saying, if I do nothing and things all go to hell, I'm not going to get yelled at as trying to do something wrong. I'm just doing nothing. But if I do something and it ends up causing an issue, wait a minute, now I can be personally held accountable and all I was trying to do was help. All right, so harness that and think, all right, if all you want to do is help, how will you help? You need to put your actions into the framework of the organizational values and your personal values. And if what you do fits within those 2 buckets and you can speak to it, I decided to make this person a smoothie because I knew the ingredients and I didn't want to disappoint a customer, and we had the ability to take their money. We weren't trusting them to come back the next day to pay for it. So I accomplished what the company wanted to, and I made the customer happy. If you get sanctioned or written up or fired from an organization for doing that, I mean, I know this sounds really, kind of, ivory tower to say, you're in the wrong organization. You don't want to work for an organization who's going to hold you accountable to doing the wrong thing when you can articulate why you did it in the bucket of these are my personal values and this is the organizational values, and they fit into both.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think I also want to clarify that like inaction is also action.
You're totally
right?
true.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like especially when you're a leader. It's probably one of the things that if you want to check a list of things that annoy me about people that have the title of leader but not the behavior, that's at the very top of that list.
Well, without it, there is no leadership. What is leadership? If all you're doing is executing someone else's plan, you're just moving. You're column B, and you're moving information from A to C. That's who you are.
Correct, exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like leaders who are not taking courageous action right now to try things, to do things, to talk to their people, to learn. Like so many people right now are in this virtual space, and it's not what we've signed up for. It's not that what we're used to. It's not how we're doing things, and there's a lot of people who do that. And look, at the same time, I don't want to cry about having to use my computer to do my job when there's so many people that are currently either furloughed or don't have a job anymore. Like that's even more serious. But I think like in this space as a leader, it becomes your job to try to figure this out and understand. I also think it's interesting because I think that what I see in talking to a lot of people that I know in multiple industries and different companies, different jobs that had some of them have worked from home and that's kind of been their career. Some of them this is their first time doing it. What I'm seeing very quickly is that the leaders are showing up in this virtual space the same way they were showing up in the real world. And
Right.
what I mean by that is that if they were engaging and interactive and inspiring, that they are figuring out how to do that in a virtual world right now as well. If they were distant, if they were delegating a lot of things, if they weren't accessible and approachable to their teams, so that like if they were micromanagers, well now they're just micromanagers in front of a camera. It's just like these are what's happening. There's been a couple cases that I will share that I have seen recently where I've actually been really proud of some people, and I will give them that. When I talk to them next, where I have seen them show up differently in a leadership space in this virtual world. I've seen it. I've heard it. I've heard from their people, their peers, that they are showing up in a different space, which like, again, kudos to them, right? Like, whatever it has triggered it, whatever has happened, they're showing up better for their team now. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that's as you were talking about the example of like the next day at the smoothie place is the first day of now a new world, where like, okay, now we have to figure this out for if this happens again. I think that's going to be similar to what happens as people come back into work and things start to happen. There's going to be this new world. And from a leadership standpoint, it now is on the leader to say, what am I taking with me? How am I taking what I learned about myself, my team, my interactions? How am I going to go deeper with that? And how I'm going to show up as a better leader and a better version of myself in the real world because of what's happened in the virtual world.
Right. That's a third bucket of people, though. So you talk about how in the one side you have leaders who didn't know how to innovate, didn't know how to make decisions grounded in values. If they went against any type of procedure their organization put out, they didn't know how to kind of navigate those waters, and they kind of just did things by the book, and that was it. Some people in that group will continue to do that now, and they're the ones who are waiting to be told what to do. But this is like, how the old example of a person who goes through the military for 20 years, if they never saw combat, they don't get promoted. They stay at the bottom, and the people who get promoted are the ones that saw combat. This is combat. This is what this is. This is the time when the muscle of leadership is exercised and made. This is when, if you want to make a name for yourself as a leader, this is when you do it. You can do it day to day too. You can do it when we're not in crisis time, but the moments like these, situations like these, will very quickly raise up those people who know how to lead in these situations, and they will stand out much more so than they would have stood out on a normal day-to-day basis, because as a leader, you need to be able to execute whatever the process is, and your organization undoubtedly has processes, and that's the whole point of this, is that you need to be able to do that as part of your job. When the process is working normally and you don't need to have to make these decisions on a grand scale, it's a lot harder to make a name for yourself. It's a lot harder to stand out in your organization. This is the time when, if you are listening right now and you're a leader of people and you're waiting for your organization to send out information about the next thing to do, don't wait for that. Think about what your values are and think about what your organizational values are and make some decisions. Innovate around this, because the things that you can come up with, the things that you can do to engage your teams in your brand through this process are the ones that are going to earn your stripes as a leader. And then when we go back to normal, whether that's a few weeks or a few months from now, when we go back to normal, you're going to be the one who's looked at as, wow, look, this person really stepped up in this crunch or in this crisis. And those are the people that make a name for themselves. Those are the people that move up in their careers.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
All right, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, I'm going to reference a chart that Adam Grant posted on LinkedIn. It was written by Michaela Carasy and Amy Edmondson of the Harvard Business Review. It's a really effective chart that talks about how our own instincts can lead us down the wrong path. So what's instinctive when facing uncertainty is waiting for additional information. In a crisis, you need to act with urgency. What's instinctive when facing uncertainty is downplaying the threat and withholding bad news. What's needed is communicating with transparency. What's instinctive to us is doubling down to explain our actions more clearly. What's needed in a crisis is taking responsibility and focusing on solving the problems. And then what's instinctive to us is staying the course just the way we're supposed to do. And what's needed in a crisis is engaging in constant updating. We're going to link to the chart in the podcast episode, but this is really important when you start thinking about what our human nature is and what we want to do, what feels comfortable to us. Those all change in a period of crisis, and what you can do to kind of navigate from what's instinctive and waiting for your organization to act for you into what your organization actually needs and doesn't have right now. This is where you make a name for yourself in leadership.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and it's a great thing that he posted on there, because I just love the idea, when they highlight what's needed, act with urgency, communicate with transparency, take responsibility, and focus on solving problems, and engage in constant updating, meaning like realize the ebb and flow, and that these things are going to constantly be moving and adjusting as you are coming up with and building the strategy for the first time for, potentially for a lot of organizations. It's kind of the idea of, building your parachute on the way down. It's the same kind of an idea here, is that you have to understand that this is moving and things are adjusting in real time. And as long as you're attuned with your people and the intent of the organization and the values, you're going to be okay.
I think that's key right there. The more rely on what you know as a leader. You know that you are an advocate for your organization and for your people. you know how to lead, and you know what the process is. So you're not going to throw it out the window. You're going to innovate it. You're going to tweak it a little bit, because it's likely that you don't need to throw the whole thing out in a crisis. It's likely that it needs to be tweaked. And the more you can do that, the better off your organization is going to be. And you're not going to get in trouble for it. It's what's needed right now.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode